What's up, faithful? It's another episode of the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast, a part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Brian. That's Al. He's angry. We're all angry. Last night was not fun. The 49ers lost their second straight game to an opponent that they should have beaten. And there's a lot to talk about today. Al, how many times did you yell at your TV last night?
Yeah, it was frustrating. I guess I'm not that angry because, like you were saying just a minute ago off air, they started out 3-4 and 3-5 or whatever the past couple of years. We're not ringing the alarm bells like crazy, but I thought last week was a blip. I thought that bad weather, physical game, missed kicks, injuries to players, just a blip, and I thought they were going to come out this week and play a lot better. Didn't happen. So I am a little bit more concerned. Biggest concern, I guess, for me is that the 49ers found ways to lose 2 weeks in a row. And look, there were a number of reasons why they lost this game. They missed more kicks. The defense couldn't get any pressure. And that's been a reoccurring theme with the defensive line not being able to get home. And it seemed like every Vikings receiver had an 8-yard cushion with every ball that they caught. And an inexplicable defensive call at the end of the first half. And we're going to talk about that and Steve Wilkes in detail. But I don't care if Ward was in place there. To me, you rush 7. I heard somewhere that's the first time since 2020 a team has done that in that situation. And it's just an inexcusable call. And again, we'll get into it. But the reason you don't do that is because of what happened. Something fluky can happen like that. And it did. McCaffrey with another red zone fumble, and the running game has been non-existent. Brock Purdy played really well, I thought, up until about 5 minutes in the fourth quarter. And then he has 2 crushing interceptions. In the turnovers, San Francisco had 3. Minnesota had 1. And coming into this game, 49ers only had 3 total, and Minnesota had 13. So completely flipped on its ear. In San Francisco, Brian had not lost a turnover battle in 16 straight games, the longest streak since the 2011-2012 Pats had 21. And the 49ers are now 0-36 under Kyle Shanahan when trailing by 8+ in the fourth quarter. Only the Panthers have a longer streak. Where do you want to start? Because, like I said, there's a lot of places. Wherever you want to start,
there's a lot of places. You know, one of the things that I saw somebody tweet and it felt like a culmination of some of the thoughts that I've had. And I don't know if this is, I would say, endemic of, again, this offensive scheme that Kyle Shanahan runs. But this team very much is a front running team, meaning that when things are going well, they go incredibly well. And 1 second, I got to close the window. There's a there. I don't know what that is, but let me close the window. 1 second.
Okay. Spencer, this is the part that you edit out. I don't know what's going on outside Brian's window. I don't know if there's somebody getting abducted. I don't know if there's hooligans out there, youths. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on out there. Wait, he's coming back. No, he's not.
We have a guy here doing mosquito treatment, but it's done with like a blower, and it's a gas powered blower, so it's loud.
Okay, I can't hear anything. We'll just
you couldn't hear it. Cool. Okay, perfect.
We'll just have Spencer.
I'm gonna start over.
All right, we're gonna go 3, 2, 1.
So I think one of the concerns that I came away with, and I saw somebody say this, tweet this, I can't remember, but basically that this 49ers team, and I don't know if this is endemic of this Shanahan offensive system, right? Is it something that you could see, you know, in Green Bay, in LA, in Miami? I'm not sure, but this team feels like a front running team, meaning that when things are going really well, or at least just well, they go really, really well. But when things go off kilter, when you aren't playing from in front, this team seems like they struggle to make to make things up, right? To make up ground, if you will. And like you said, Kyle Shanahan under the 49ers now is 0-36 when trailing by 8+ points in the fourth quarter. And I would say that it's probably fair to point to that being a quarterback stat
Mm-hmm.
largely and maybe completely. But at the same time, I saw that stat, that 0-36 stat from Josh Dubow from the AP. And I had replied and asked if he could find what Kyle Shanahan coordinated offenses, like what their record was when trailing in the fourth quarter by 8 points or more. And he didn't reply. So I would still be interested to know that. But it just feels like, and JT O'Sullivan has said this before as well in his QB school, that the drop back passing game that Kyle Shanahan has in his scheme is not very good. And again, this offense is based on staying ahead of the chains, play action, disguises, things like that. But when you get down by 8 in the fourth quarter and all you can do is drop back and have a traditional, 5 to 7 step drop back passing game, this offense struggles every time it has to happen. I can't think of a time where it doesn't. And again, I don't know if that is quarterback related or if that's just again a bug in this offensive system. But that is to me the biggest concern on the offensive side is if this defense isn't going to be top 5 like it has been over the past 4 years, and they're going to be relied upon to have to come back and win some games that they may be behind in. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not convinced that they can do that. Now, is this because Debo was out and Trent Williams was out? Maybe. Maybe if Debo's in that game, things go a little bit differently because I think Debo gives Kyle Shanahan a even more than Christian McCaffrey, kind of an out in terms of, hey, we just need to get this guy the ball in his hands in space and he'll make magic happen. And he didn't have that option. He didn't have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if he did, things look different. And maybe if Trent Williams is in there, some of that pressure that Brock Purdy was under during the game isn't there. But at the same time, I think Brock Purdy I believe he was hurried, I want to say 8 times. 6 of those were from Danielle Hunter rushing against Colton McKivitz. So even if Williams was in there, that wouldn't have made a
Right. Still
difference.
coming from the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm frustrated, but I'm not like sounding the alarm that all of a sudden this team sucks. I do think right now, and again, this is a week to week league. Right now, I think we can stop talking about whether it's the Eagles or the 49ers who are the best in the NFC because it's quite obvious that it's the Eagles right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there were some flaws exposed the last 2 weeks on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball that is going to take some self-scouting and some coaching to fix. And I just hope that they have the coaching staff to do that. I think they do on the offensive side, but it's the defensive side that worries me more, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, and Kyle can be stubborn. It seems like he wants to have a lot of gut punches throughout the game and then hit you with something big. And sometimes, like you said, you need a drop back passing game. Go, I don't know, go
Mhm,
5 wide or 4 wide or something.
mhm,
Just try to change it up. But he seems stubborn to want to do that. And I thought for Purdy, again, I thought he played well. And actually, again, in my notes, I was writing things were not going well for the Niners, and Purdy seemed poised. He was poised.
mhm.
He had a couple throws. He threw a hospital ball to Kittle.
Yeah.
Um, there were a few reads. I don't think
By the
he
way,
probably.
on that Kittle ball, did you see what Kittle mouthed afterwards? Because they showed it
Oh,
afterwards, and he's got he goes,
he got
"Oh man, right in the dick." That's
yeah.
exactly what I was like. Oh, brutal, brutal. But yeah, that hospital ball to Kittle, I was very Jimmy G-esque for sure.
Yeah, and a couple balls where he didn't make the right read, I don't think. But overall, he played, I thought, very well. And then he was set up for a big moment, right? I
Mhm,
said, this is Purdy's moment.
mhm,
And the first interception, a couple plays where Juwan Jennings, as much as I thought he had a pretty good game. He slipped on a couple of routes that cost them, but this was weird because Purdy clearly threw it to a spot.
Mhm.
So there had to be some miscommunication somewhere. I don't think he was that far off. I wouldn't think that he would throw it that far off. So whether Jennings stopped the route or slipped and it was still a shitty throw, a little bit of both, I don't know. But something just looked
Yeah.
kind of off on that interception. And then
Yep.
coming back, I actually thought at the end of the game they had a lot of time. That minute 11 or whatever it was went by pretty quickly, and Purdy should have thrown the ball away there or done anything other than
Or
what he
scrambled.
did, which is essentially throw it up for or throw it up for grabs, scramble and spike it really
Yeah.
quickly. So he made two really bad decisions at the end. But what's going to happen now is people are going to say, "Wait a minute, is he going to choke in these spots?" We haven't seen it. We don't know. It was the same thing we talked about with Moody. Until it happens again, we don't know.
Mhm.
This isn't a 15-year veteran or a 10-year veteran. This is a 23-year-old young quarterback who hasn't been in these spots. And he didn't do it in this game. That doesn't mean he won't do it in the next game, but we don't know. And until we see it, it is going to be a concern. And I heard a stat, and I have to check it. I don't know if it's totally correct or what, but Purdy is 12 of 31 when trailing in the fourth quarter. And I heard that I have to look it up to see if it's accurate or not. I will. But so there's been some issues with him trailing in the fourth quarter. Now, last year against the Raiders, he did play well.
Mhm.
But the last two games, he brought them in field goal range last week against the Browns. There were some also pretty shitty throws on that
Yeah, they
drive.
were. Yeah.
But he did make a couple good throws too. And this week we'll see. But he's a kid who at 23 years old, he's tasked with a Super Bowl ready team. He's in a tough spot. He's going to be under a microscope. And this was a game where you mentioned they didn't have Debo, they didn't have Trent Williams. They also didn't have a running game.
Yeah.
Niners running backs had 16 carries for 47 yards. And again, McCaffrey fumbled in the red zone for the second time in 3 games. And the Niners were moving the ball in the first half. You had the fumble, you had the missed field goal, you had a touchdown, and then they ran the clock out with like 4 seconds
Mhm.
left or whatever it was. So there were really only 3 offensive plays. But the running game, Brian, has been a problem. McCaffrey in his last 3 games, 45 carries, 139 yards, 3.1 yards per carry in those 2 fumbles.
Yeah.
This season, Elijah Mitchell, 19 carries for 48 yards, and he has a long of 18. So his other 18 carries, he has 30 yards and a
Yep.
21.1% rushing success rate. Mitchell's been terrible. And I know a lot of that's
Yeah.
the offensive line hasn't been great either. But what I want to know is in a game like this, on a fast track, when you could use somebody physical, where the hell is Jordan Mason for a carry or two?
Yeah.
Jordan Mason this season, 21 carries, 117 yards, 2 touchdowns, 61.9% rushing success rate. I was shocked he didn't get a couple touches, especially with McCaffrey hurting. And I know Kyle loves McCaffrey, and McCaffrey is phenomenal, but the running wasn't working with him. He is banged up. I would just like to see Mason get the ball a little bit here and there. I didn't understand why he did it.
And honestly, like, why not? Why haven't we seen like Mason in the backfield and McCaffrey in the slot? Like, if something's not
Yeah,
working, let's switch it up. Like, again, we talked about missing Debo. Why not put McCaffrey in that Debo role? He could fill that role quite
sure.
nicely. And then, like I said, put Mason in the backfield. And like you said, Kyle's stubborn. You know, he said somebody asked him about Mitchell over Mason, or if CMC can't go, you know, who would start? And basically he was like, well, Mitchell would start because he's proved a lot to us. And I'm like, I mean, I get that. I understand. But at the same time, he hasn't proved anything this year. And we're playing
He looks
this
like
year.
he has no burst.
We're
He
not
does
playing
not look
last year.
great.
Yeah. He doesn't look like the same guy that you had in 2021. Those knee injuries obviously have sapped some of his athleticism and his burst. And you've got a guy that has been productive this year. Why is he not getting more opportunities? And not only that, but why is Spencer Burford still playing? Like, Spencer Burford is probably one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL right now. It's hard to watch at times. And you've got a veteran waiting there on the bench to be
Mhm.
used. Like, why is John Feliciano not getting an opportunity over Spencer Burford? I like the idea of seeing what you have in the young guys, and Burford played fairly well last year, but you continued to sub Daniel Brunskill in because you didn't trust Burford enough. And now you've got Feliciano. Like, why is he still in there? And these runs, I mean, what I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the blocking scheme. The interior of the offensive line has been just absolute trash. for most of the season, and that largely could be part of it. But there does not seem to be any talk of making any changes or anything like that. And I understand the offensive line is a unit, right? And you can't just plug and play somebody. And
Mhm.
people keep clamoring on Twitter for, the trade deadline is coming up. Like, why aren't we looking at offensive linemen? It's like, it's not that easy. It's not that easy to bring somebody in mid-season
Yeah.
to a scheme that they are unfamiliar with and just plug them in and have them play, right? And then,
Yeah.
the
It's not like
argument to
trading
that
for
is,
a
well,
second baseman. Right.
right, exactly. Or even a wide receiver or a running
Yeah.
back or a defensive back, right? Like, out of all of the positions on the field, offensive line is probably the least likely that you can plug and play somebody from the outside. Now, if
Mhm.
you could figure out a way to trade for somebody that runs a very similar system, possibly somebody from Minnesota like an Ezra Cleveland, who I believe, I don't know if they put him on the IR, which means if they did, then they can't trade him. But I know he's out with like a foot injury, but it wasn't like a season-ending one. And Dalton Reisner, they signed early in the season, and he's come in and looked really good. That offensive line for the Vikings looked phenomenal. And I don't know if that was just the Vikings or if that was the 49ers. And again, we'll get to the
Oof.
defensive side of the ball, but it just it just seems like, I don't know, they put up 42 against Dallas and then just read their own press clippings and went like, "Hey, like, we're hot shit. Like, we're good to go. No one's going to beat us." And they've come out flat 2 weeks in a row against
Mhm.
inferior opponents and got embarrassed. Like, I mean, they should be embarrassed. The defense should be embarrassed. Steve Wilkes should be embarrassed. The offense was successful in moving the ball but not scoring. And then it just it's just like I said, it
Self-inflicted
was just a
wounds.
front yeah. It was just a
Yeah.
frustrating game. And now you've got a team in the Bengals that are also coming off a bye, right? So that's 3 weeks in a row that they're going to
Mhm.
face an opponent coming off their bye. Cleveland was coming off their bye, Minnesota was coming off their bye, and now Cincinnati will be coming off their bye. So they've had 2 weeks to prepare, and the 49ers are going to be on a short week. Like, this game coming up this week, I don't know, but
It's a big
there's
one.
got to
And you
be
talk
there's got to be answers somewhere. And Debo's not going to be in for Cincinnati. So what are you going to do differently against Cincinnati? And I'll tell you what, Lou Anarumo is very similar to Brian Flores. He's going to throw a bunch of shit
Oh,
at
yeah.
you that
Yep.
you're not ready for. And it could be a long day for Brock Purdy because Brian Flores, I heard this on Extra Point Taken on The Ringer with Ben Solak and Shio Kapadia. And Brian Flores and the Vikings defense leads the league in 7-man pressures, and also so rushing 7,
Mhm.
and they also lead the league in only rushing 3. So it's like you really don't know what you're
What's gonna
getting,
come
and
at
that
you?
that seemed to rattle him a little bit. And that interception to end the game came on a play where they only rushed 3 and dropped 8 into the pattern, and you could see no one was open. No one.
Well, they gotta stop the self-inflicted wounds because, like you said, they did move the ball, but I said 3 turnovers. I actually counted missed field goals like a turnover too. And you have Moody missing the 40-yarder, and that's a whole other thing. This is the crazy thing about Jake Moody. He's one of 3 49ers kickers in the
It's a
history of
wild
the
stat.
franchise to have 2 55-yard plus field goals, along
Yeah.
with David Akers and Phil Dawson. But he can't hit
Yeah.
a 40-yard. You don't know what you're gonna get out of him. So yeah, he may come in there and hit a 58-yarder, but then he may shank a 38-yarder right now,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
you can't trust him until he proves otherwise. But he's going to go out. This was indoors. He missed a 40-yarder.
Yeah.
It just
I
takes
mean,
all
so
the
did the
wind out of
Vikings
your
kicker.
sails as you go down. It's getting scary with him. So we'll see how that one goes too. But the biggest concern to me right now, Brian, in last week watching the defense, a lot of people said, "Oh, you know what? Like they only gave up 19 points. Like they should have won." They did not. They had a couple turnovers. Other than that, they
Hmm.
didn't play well. The
No.
Browns were running the ball. If you had even an average quarterback, they probably would have gotten diced up in the secondary as well with PJ Walker, throwing the ball into the ground and everything else. In this week, I mean, Steve Wilkes, they ate his lunch. Absolutely ate his lunch. Vikings had come into this game, okay? They were 26th in the NFL in third down conversion rate coming into this game. They went 8 of 13.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk Cousins threw 45 times and they could not get him on the ground.
They didn't
And
get him down
this,
once.
no, not at all. They couldn't get to him blitzing. They couldn't get him with four guys. And the defense came into the game 21st in sack rate at 5.8%. They're now 27th in sack rate. Pressure rate 28.1 coming into the game. Their yards per carry was 16. They weren't playing well coming into the game. And this team is built on their defensive line. Their
Mm-hmm.
defensive line looks terrible right now. How about
Yeah.
these numbers? Nick Bosa, 3.5 sacks in his last 12 games. So this is going back to the last game of last year in the playoffs. He didn't have a sack in those 4 games. I'm sorry, maybe so he had 1 within those 5 games going back to last
Mm-hmm.
year. And this year in 7 games, he's got 2.5. The holdout definitely affected him. And everybody's saying, like, oh, yeah, he's fine. He's working out at home. It's not the same thing, and you're seeing it right now. I don't care about his PFF grade. You got to get home at some point. He is not playing up to his level. He's not a TJ Watt. He's not a Myles Garrett right now, the way that he's playing. He's tied for 64th in the NFL in sacks at the moment. I mean, come on. And he actually said he sounded a little annoyed at the end of the game in the press conference. He said, yeah, we're usually a rush 4 kind of team, but I don't know. Like he said he's not used to blitzing as much as they are right now. Now I looked it up, and according to Pro Football Reference, it says they're only blitzing 17.3% of the time, which is the second fewest in the league. But maybe it's when they're blitzing. Maybe it's always on third down. I really don't know. But also, what was the stat that I had? So Bosa, Cleveland Farrell, and Drake Jackson, between the 3 of them, they have 5.5 sacks this year. And 3 of those came in week 1 with Drake Jackson when he kind of fell into those sacks. Randy Gregory does have 1, but it's only 6.5 sacks for that whole unit. They're just not getting home right now. And did you hear, I don't know if you heard this, Brian Baldinger was on, he was on 95.7 or KMBR. I got to see what he said, if I could find it now. He said he was on 95.7 the game. He was on the morning roast. He said, I've seen very little from Hargrave. Nick Bosa right now is strictly a power rusher, and his power moves are not winning in the pass game. For Kirk Cousins to drop back 45 times and not get taken down once, I can't imagine a worse flight home. So the Niners are playing a lot of money for this defensive line, and they are not getting it done right now. They're getting run on. They're not getting to the quarterback. They're not getting home. And the deficiencies in the secondary are showing up because that front 4 is not getting the job done. And Wilkes isn't getting the job done with the blitzes he's calling either.
Well, and here's the thing, and I tweeted this out earlier today. This defense is regressing with personnel that is better than what DeMeco Ryans had. Right? This defense, personnel-wise, is better than what DeMeco Ryans had last year. When you add a Javon Hargrave, right? When you add a Randy Gregory, when you still have Warner and Greenlaw, when maybe they are significantly missing Al-Shaair, but I feel like Oren Burks has played pretty well in that role this season. I don't think it's been a humongous drop off. Diamador Lenore is better this year than he was last year. You still have Charvarius Ward. You still have Gibson and Hufanga. This defense, personnel wise, is better, and it's performing at such significantly less efficiency than DeMeco Ryans had it, and that comes down to scheme. I don't know how else you can slice it up, right? If all things remain the same and or might be slightly better, but the performance is significantly worse, you've got to look at the guy that took over. And, I am hearing all this talk about like Wilkes needs to get out of the booth, blah, blah, blah. That has nothing to do with anything. Let's be perfectly honest. Does this defense perhaps miss the passion of a Robert Saleh and a DeMeco Ryans on the sideline, just going nuts when his squad does something good? Maybe. But one of the best defensive coordinators in NFL history, Vic Fangio, has never once coached from the sideline. He has always coached from the box, and his defenses are always good. I guess technically he was coaching from the sideline when he was head coach in Denver, but still. I'm not willing to even consider that as an excuse for what's going on. I just don't know if Steve Wilks is a good defensive play caller. There's not a huge track record there. Is he a great coach and a great leader of men? 100%. But that's great if you're the head coach or if you're a position coach. But if you're a play caller, you got to have some talent there. And it certainly seems like up to this point, he's been a little in over his head. Like, again, what are we doing calling what we called to end the half? Like, what is that call? And I guarantee Kyle Shanahan's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that is rookie level mistakes from
Yeah,
a guy that's supposed to lead, from a guy that you're entrusting to continue the legacy of phenomenal defense. And so it's, it's games. We've played 7 games. At this point in 2021, the 49ers were 3-4. They lost their next game to go to 3-5, and then they made it to the NFC Championship game. At this point last year, they were 3-4. They just got their asses handed to them by the Chiefs on their home field, and they didn't lose another game until the NFC Championship game. It's a long season. All is not lost, but there are some very, very concerning things that we have seen, especially over the past 2 weeks. And let's remember that we are looking at this team through Super Bowl lenses. Is this team going to win the Super Bowl? Because they've put that on themselves.
This isn't, are they going to get a wild card? Or are they going to win the division?
They are the ones. They are the ones that said it's the Super Bowl this year. Brock Purdy is the quarterback because this is a Super Bowl ready team. They made moves because this is a Super Bowl ready team. So you have to look at this team through that lens. And so far, it's not where it needs to be.
And the thing at the end of the half, so it's 10-7. The Niners are going to get the ball to start the third quarter. You got a little momentum. You can come out and get the ball. If you hold them even to a field goal, if they do get a field goal, you still have a chance to take the lead coming out in the second half. We talked about it. No team since 2020 has rushed 7 people in that situation. I don't know what the result was then.
There's no reason to.
There's no reason to. And I've seen a few people say, well, Ward was right there. If he held on to the ball, it's an interception. It worked. No. The reason why that's inexcusable is because something fluky can happen. And it did. It did happen. A 60-yard touchdown. You had 16 seconds left, and the Vikings had no timeouts. The worst thing that's going to happen there is maybe Cousins completes the ball to the 42 and the kicker bombs one. That's probably the worst thing that would happen there if you're not being a dumbass and do what you did. It was inexcusable to me. Inexcusable. And a lot of things cost them the game. That was one of them. That was a big one. And Kyle did seem pissed about it after. He said, yeah, we have to talk about that. But it's just a dumb call. What are you trying to accomplish there? What are you going to get a sack? I don't understand what he was trying to accomplish there. And we talked about this. So this was a tweet from Nick Wagner. So their pass rush splits against Minnesota. They blitzed. Cousins was 8-13 for 138 yards. They had a 23.1% pressure rate. They didn't blitz. Cousins was 27-32 for 240 yards, 22.8 pressure rate. And then he said for the season, the Niners have a pressure rate of 26.7%, which is 22nd, and 23.5 when not blitzing, which is 23rd, and 40.5 when they do blitz, which is 18th. So they can't get pressure no matter what they do right now, with what's going on with this team. So I do think Wilks is a problem. Salah and Ryans, they were linebacker guys. Wilks is a secondary guy. So maybe there's just some different stuff going on here. But he's a problem, but also the performance of the defensive line is also a problem. I'm not letting the secondary, again, I don't think the secondary played well at all. Didn't play well at all last night. But this team is built on their defensive line with the expectation that is going to make up for any deficiencies in the secondary. And the defensive line is not holding their end of the bargain right now. And look with Bosa, man. I tweeted last night. Sometimes I tweet things and people get pissed, even though they're just stats. Like I tweeted about Debo, how Debo's only had 936 yards since he signed that contract, and people, it's just a stat. People get all pissed and oh God, he's still worth it. Some people did it, some people didn't. But with the Bosa stuff, I put it out last night after the game. He's only got 3.5 sacks in his last 12 games. And again, I'm just waiting. Like, not that I read a ton of it, but I'm like, people are
Sure.
just going to come at me for this. I can't wait. There might have been 70 replies. Not one person was like, what are you talking about? Everybody was like pissed. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
he's not doing what he's supposed to do. They gave him all this money. And here's my thing too. When like, it's easy to jump on somebody when the stats aren't there, right? Like
Hmm.
it's easy to jump and pile on. But he wasn't there all training camp. He
Right.
wasn't there all preseason. He wasn't there. So if he is having trouble acclimating, well, you weren't there, dude. And to think that he was just going to come back in and be like, oh, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to get my 15 and a half sacks, my 16 sacks. It doesn't work that way. You have to build up. And Nick Bosa may have a phenomenal second half of the season. We know he's a great player. He always has been. But right now, he is not getting home. He is not a TJ Watt. He is not a Myles Garrett that absolutely blows up the game. Myles Garrett blew up the game this past weekend. TJ Watt blew up the game this past weekend. I think Pittsburgh has won 2 games basically because of TJ Watt creating
Hmm.
turnovers.
Hmm.
He has not been that guy. He may well be that guy starting next week. He's been that guy in the past. But to this point, he absolutely deserves some criticism for how the first half of the season has gone.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Again, being a fan of a team, it's emotional in nature. I get it. I understand. But when you criticize a player that deserves criticism, that is not hate. That is not go root for another team. Like, that's none of that. That is just being
Passionate,
critical
a fan.
of,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
it's just
Yep.
being and recognizing when there's something to critique, right? Criticism is not it, it's not hate. It's just observation. And like you said, you tweet out a stat, it's like, what a hater. And it's like, no, it's just a stat. Like, if that stat makes you feel some type of way, that's on you, right? That's just an objective fact. And the objective fact right now is that Nick Bosa is not living up to that contract. And doesn't mean that he can't, doesn't mean that he won't, doesn't mean that, like you said, he won't come out in the second half and have 15 sacks and look like the best player in the NFL like he did last year. Definitely, I would argue more likely than not. But that's not where we're at right now. Through week 7, he has been not good. Javon Hargrave has been not good. Drake Jackson had one good game. He has been not good. Cleveland Farrell, just a dude, not really doing a whole lot. And that is the other thing, is this defense is built on the idea that you are going to get to the quarterback, which is why you
Mhm.
play zone so much on the back end. And if you aren't going to get to the quarterback, then your zone is going to get exposed. Let's not forget, this 49ers defense allowed the night it allowed to Kirk Cousins without Justin Jefferson.
Right.
Like, what if Justin
Jordan Addison
Jefferson
and
was in
TJ
this game?
Hawkinson.
What would this have looked like? Like, would it have been significantly worse? Probably. And guess what? Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, they're coming to town next week. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? How are you
You
going
know,
to change things up?
you mentioned, now I'm thinking about it now. You said they might be more talented on defense. I don't know if they are, because I take Ward over Oliver. I'd absolutely take El Shair over Burks. And I would take the combination of what we got anyway last year and the year before of Ebelcom and Menihu over what's opposite Bosa now. So I don't know. I don't know. I think that Javon Hargrave is a big name that came in, but I don't know if they're more talented. And I kind of thought that the other defensive end position was going to be an issue. And it clearly has been.
Mm-hmm.
If Farrell's got, Cleveland Farrell's got no sacks. Drake Jackson just had him in the one game. Randy Gregory, we'll see how he does. Maybe they're not as talented. Maybe that's part of it. So again, we'll see as the season goes on, but it's just been, that's the scary thing, Brian. I think that's where I want to go for our last sort of segment on the show. We're talking about the Super Bowl, like you said. This is not
Mm-hmm.
about, hey, are they going to win the division? Are they going to win a playoff game? Like the Lions, if they win a playoff game, probably everybody's maybe happy this year. I don't know, probably.
Yeah.
But it's not that way for the Niners. It's Super Bowl or bust right now. And right now, we've been talking about the Eagles, and I said the Niners are going to go in there and they have something to prove. this version of the 49ers, whether they have something to prove or not, they're going to
We'll
go into
get
Philadelphia
waxed.
and get whooped on the lines.
Yeah.
They're going to get whooped on the
Yeah.
offensive and defensive line if they keep playing the way that they are right now. They have enough talent to change that around. But we'll see, because this time last year we were saying the same thing, like, holy shit, they're 3-4 or whatever they were. And they could in 5-6 weeks from now be steamrolling again. Well, we got to wait and see, but it worries me, man. I don't know if they're good enough in the trenches.
Yeah, that offensive line is, to me, the bigger concern than the defensive line. Like you said, that defensive line has a ton of talent on there, even if you're just looking at Bosa, Armstead, and Hargrave. And I think you should add Randy Gregory, because Randy Gregory is a proven pass rusher in this league. He was hurt in Denver, and that was the issue. And Denver's like, we just don't want to continue to pay you on this $70 million contract, so we're going to get rid of you. So, when you look at those four, right? Bosa, Armstead, Hargrave, Gregory. There aren't very many defensive lines in the NFL that are going to be better than that. The Eagles have one, and because Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox are just absolute menaces in the middle.
Yeah.
So I'm not as concerned, but I am concerned about the offensive line, and I'm concerned specifically about the interior of the offensive line, because again, none of this matters if you can't beat the Eagles, right? That's what you have to look at this point. It's the Eagles and everybody else in the NFC. And the Eagles boast an incredibly stout interior defensive line. And the 49ers boast an incredibly porous and average at best interior offensive line. And that's really where it scares me. And that, to me, is where I need to see a significant, I don't want to say upgrade, because like I said, I'm not certain that they would look to bring somebody in, but why aren't we seeing Feliciano at least get a shot or whatever? Because like I said, Burford and Banks and Brendel, those three, they haven't been great. You've got nothing behind Brendel, so you can't change there. And Banks had a great year last year. He's been okay this year. I don't think he's been as good, but I would still give him more rope than I would give Burford. You've got Feliciano. Just put him in. See if you can get something more out of that spot than you're currently getting. And Jalen Moore, kudos to Jalen Moore, who played really well last night on at left tackle. And maybe now you look at it and you go, okay, maybe we need to try Jalen Moore on the right side, because Colton McKivitz really hasn't been it so far this season. So again, I think there's some movement and experimentation that you can start to do on that line, because that line has got to improve significantly if you have any hope of reaching the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and still time to turn it around. Again, we've been here before. We've been frustrated in the beginning of the season. Doesn't mean it's going to be that way come November and December and January, but we're reacting to what we're seeing right now. And right now there's enough to get you worried. And like you said, next week's game, which we'll preview next show, it's a big one, because if you have a healthy Joe Burrow now, if his calf is calmed down with the bye week, and like you said, Higgins and Chase and Joe Mixon and Lou Anarumo. What did I say his last name?
Lou Anarumo. Big Lou, as they like to call him.
He gives the Chiefs fits. He's a good defensive coordinator, so he's going to come. 2 weeks to prepare. He's going to come with some stuff. So it's going to be a big game. Another game I was confident about before. Now I don't know. The Niners got a lot of soul searching to do this week, and they have to come back and figure out exactly who the hell they are.
But the silver lining in all of this is this team has been a second half team for a long time now. And you saw it in 2020, you saw it in 2021, you saw it in 2022. In 2021, they were a second half team after starting 3-5. In 2022, they were a second half team after starting 3-4. In 2023, they started 5-2. If they're going to turn it on the second half like they traditionally do, they're in a much better position now than they were even last year. And you look at the division and you say the Rams are better than we thought, but still not great. And the Seahawks have looked okay. They haven't looked phenomenal, and they just lost Uchenna Nwosu for the season with a torn pectoral. So that's a big loss for their defense. you might see them try and make a trade before the deadline to bolster that defensive line, because he's their Nick Bosa. Not saying he's at that level, but he's their best pass rusher. And so, I mean, at this point, like I said, you have to take care of your division, and they're in a good spot for that. And at this point, you just hope that there are some adjustments that can be made, and they can continue that trend of really turning it on in the second half and getting on a roll as they enter the playoffs. And at 5-2 through 7 games, hey, it could be a lot worse, and it has been a lot worse just the past 2 seasons. So the sky is not falling. It sucks. There's 2 losses that should have been victories against inferior opponents, one with an inferior quarterback but a great defense, and the other one, I mean, hey, we had Dane Mizutani on, who was like, I don't know what the Vikings are going to be able to do against this 49ers defense, and I don't know how their defense is going to stop the 49ers. And look at, like, blown away by the result of that. So again, it is a week to week league. So let's put some guardrails on that cliff. Let's put some, let's hook you up to a safety line if you're ready to jump off right now, and just say, hey, on to Cincinnati, as Bill Belichick is wont to say. We're on to Cincinnati. That's all we can do. And hey, this team is ultra talented. They have the players. They have the coaching. I have confidence that they will figure it out. But expectations are sky high. And when you put 2 duds out like they did the past 2 weeks, people are going to be frustrated.
Yeah, we'll be back next show. We're going to record Thursday looking at that Cincinnati game. And we have Will Silva from NFL Network as a guest. So love talking to Will. He's a great guy. He's a 49ers fan. So that'd be a fun conversation. So until then, for Brian, I'm Al.
Later.